When you think of the player characters of the Gold Source Half-Life games, you think of these three, silent individuals thrown into this horrible situation on the same day, each trapped in a facility fighting for their lives. Gordon Freeman has become one of the most recognizable silent protagonists, standing among spacefaring badasses and other less likely heroes as the nerdy one that truly allows his game's target audience to slip into his shoes. I mean, most people aren't physicists, but even less are the fucking Doomslayer. However, there are two other player characters in a Gold Source Half-Life game that often go forgotten. Two women who led the co-op game Half-Life Decay. Why exactly has time left these two behind? Perhaps it's because Decay itself has yet to receive an official release on anything but the PlayStation 2? Yeah, probably that. But today, on the 20th anniversary of Decay's release, I'm going to be looking at the most obscure—
second most obscure.
Oh, right. The second most obscure player character in a Half-Life game. You can hear about the most obscure over on Richter Overtime's channel. So, yeah, let's start the video. Now, the reason Gina Cross is just a bit more widely known is that, unlike Colette Green, Gina's story doesn't begin and end with Decay. Aside from the G-Man, Gina is the only character to make a physical appearance in all four of the Gold Source Half-Life games. Yeah, Gordon was going to be in Decay, but he didn't make the cut. More on that later. Before we really get into it, I want to point out that most of what I'll talk about here comes exclusively from the Gearbox games and materials around them. Gina's appearances in Valve's games begin in the Hazard Course and end as a model in the Deathmatch mode. And speaking of the Hazard Course, if you aren't familiar with Decay, that's most likely where you'll know Gina from. The course itself deserves its own video, so I won't go too deep here, but it's always been one of my favorite little parts of the game. It's like a perfect microcosm for Black Mesa in general. Rusty catwalks and harsh cement rooms with holograms in the middle, the mix of the old and new facility that you see throughout the game. And it has the weird shit too. Why does a physicist need to swim? Why would they give you a goddamn crowbar to break wooden boxes? Why do they teach you to use a fucking machine gun with a motherfucking grenade launcher strapped to its barrel? I mean, for fuck's sake, they don't even give the guards that shit.
Automatic medical systems engaged. Morphine administered.
And at the center of it all is Gina, with the perfect voice for something like this.
The first move we will practice in the Hazard Course is basic jumping. You will attempt to get over this set of pipes using only your run and jump commands.
She is played by an actor named Kathy Levin in all of her appearances, who also provided her voice for the tram announcer and the HEV suit. This might imply that Gina was the one to voice these in-universe, but we know of at least 3 other women working for Black Mesa, so I have a bit more faith in the company than that. A bit.
The Black Mesa Research Facility is an equal opportunity employer.
We learn from the PlayStation 2 manual, which may or may not be canon, that Gina's hologram is only active when she's busy doing something else. The rest of the time, she's there in person, because you really can't expect these people to make it through this themselves. Okay, I know this thing is specifically meant for Hazard Course trainees, and they probably aren't running the Einsteins through it, but to this day, we've only seen like 4 Black Mesa employees who weren't older than the Mesa the facility is built into. Walter's on the schedule for a simulation of what actually happens in these games. You can't tell me they weren't breaking hips in there on a regular basis. And I wish I had something more interesting to show you than this single schedule sheet, but this is where like half of Gina's known activities come from. It tells us that she was prototyping a Mark V HEV suit with Dr. Keller, maybe the same one we see in Half-Life 2, and maybe not, and we know she wrote stuff on this piece of paper at some point. Exciting stuff. This whole sheet and her bio in the manual come together to prove that Gearbox decided Gina was the Hazard Course person, and would never ever stray from that path, despite a degree in bioengineering. Anyway, Gina does occasionally get to do something outside of preparing the elderly for a violent demise. When we see her in Blue Shift on these security cameras, she's pushing a cart. It's a fun little Easter egg, right on par with Gordon in the hallway. See, I'm making fun of them here, but these little things are pretty cool to have in these expansions. It makes these games feel so much more connected. When the time came for Gina to have a starring role in a Half-Life storyline, Gearbox gave her a last name taken from the Vox.
Dr. Cross, report to Sector C.
And paired her up with a new scientist for that co-op gimmick. Again, see Richter's video for more on Colette. This was actually my first time playing Decay, and the actual game only makes up about half the fun of co-op, so please excuse me if I've missed anything major here. Half-Life Decay takes a rather arcadey approach, unlike every other game in the series aside from the arcade game. The levels are split up into individual missions, which feels really weird for Half-Life. The story is nothing special. It introduces this guy, Dr. Keller, who is going to be Kleiner until Valve told Gearbox that they had plans for that character in their sequel, and for the most part, it's just another romp through Black Mesa during during the alien invasion, no biggie. However, rather than focusing on your escape, Decay connects itself to Half-Life 1 as often as it can.
Unfortunately, the delivery rocket cannot launch without the all-clear codes. Now, any security guard in this dorm complex will get the codes we need.
You get to take part in that hallway walk from Blue Shift's security cameras while Colette turns the anti-mass spectrometer on, and your goals after shit hits the fan are fairly uninteresting, like escorting Rosenberg to a radio so he can contact the military. We couldn't get there though, because he refused to move in this janky PC port from 2008. A gold source bug? Result of bad ping? Who's to say? And don't think I'm just glossing over Rosenberg calling the military in on the radio. He might be the biggest accidental antagonist of this whole damn series, especially in Blue Shift, that fucker. That fucker Rosenberg.
Slow down, Calhoun. I can't keep up at this pace.
The last few missions see the duo try to shut down the dimensional rift using that satellite Gordon launches in a much cooler scene from Half-Life 1. They succeed, take down a big stingray, and see Barney from Blue Shift for a few seconds before the game ends. We learn in the original game that sealing the rift didn't actually stop the aliens because of a portal in Zen being held open by
the intense concentration of a single powerful being. You will know it when you see it. I hate to say this, Gordon, but you must kill it.
Medical attention.
So in actuality, the final boss of this game doesn't mean a ton for the overall story. Much like how Blue Shift ends with you rescuing a bunch of stupid people and opposing force has you kill a thing that would have been nuked in the next 5 minutes anyway.
Quite so.
But anyway, what happened to Gina in the end? Decay just fades out. Well, I haven't mentioned this little Easter egg in opposing force until now. This corpse, hidden away in one of those little Zen spots you can get to with the displacer cannon, is her most likely fate. Randall Stewart Pitchford III was asked on Twitter and gave a resounding confirmation. At the same time, though, this is her multiplayer model, which might explain the weird red HEV that looks an awful lot like a deathmatch default. Looks a bit more like Colette's suit than Gina's. In fact, adding to all the confusion, security guards in Decay refer to both players' suits as orange, because that's how they were in development.
The orange in that suit really brings out your eyes.
A lot of blunders for the company that gave us 2 angles of the cart being pushed in a hallway, Okay, so as usual, a good chunk of the interesting information we have on a Half-Life subject is how it was going to be rather than how it was. Gina's model in Half-Life 1 was based on a real person, Mona Lisa Guthrie, sister of John Guthrie, who you'll recognize as the name on the locker with the American flag and the bullets for no reason. She was planned at some point to be a selectable female player character, like in Pokemon. The idea was that she'd be married to Gordon and working with him when the accident happens. I say idea because, judging by this gem of an interview, these were a lot of harebrained, way too late concepts from Gabe Newell, like real-time moss growth. I'll let you be the judge, though. Is it true that you scrapped a hell of a lot around December 97 and started again? How did it feel to have to do that? What exactly got cut from the final release that you would have liked to see in?
I wanted to be able to let people play through as a male or female character, and I wanted the player's spouse to be in the game. That was about the only major thing that got left out. I still feel bad about not letting people play through as Gina.
And now some questions for the women. Is it true that initially Gina was meant to play more of a part in Half-Life?
Yes. Gina was to be the female version of Gordon, or his spouse, depending upon whom you played as. I had a bunch of ideas about how the two would travel through the game that Mark and the others had to convince me weren't helping the game.
Why was she cut?
It just didn't fit well with the other parts of the design.
Why were none of the scientists female?
We ran out of memory, actually.
In fact, why are there no women in single-player, that I've found at least?
In order to have decent female characters, we would have had to double the resources used for the models and animations, and we weren't able to do that.
Will there be women in TF2?
We hope to, yes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's calling.
Okay, but to be fair, Gabe gives a pretty well thought out response when the interviewer asks about Lara Croft for no reason, and recommends that more development teams hire women to help make better games. These bits were just so incredibly awkward to read that I couldn't help but include them. Despite all that, Gina wasn't always going to be the only female scientist in the game. The cut Communication Center chapter, featuring that one room and on a rail, was going to feature another scientist who would betray the player. This one cut area had just the right combination of strange quirks to make me talk about it all the damn time. As we know, all all of this was cut and Gina was relegated to the training mode. But it wouldn't be a Half-Life character without a few weird-ass redesigns. There's the first model, the Day 1 demo model, the Half-Life 1 retail model with a worse hairstyle, the deathmatch model, the low-poly deathmatch model to save on resources, the terrifying Dreamcast model, the PS2 hologram model, the PS2 Decay model, and the PS2 deathmatch model, which is, in fact, different. I'd say Gina probably has more unique models than any other named Black Mesa employee, but then we get into the Eli Maxwell and Captain Vance situation, and I just can't handle that right now. Since I doubt I'll get a better chance, though, I'll go over the known missions cut from Decay for fun. Information for these comes from a lot of places, but my biggest source was a thread on Valve Time, a forum that's essentially dead. The game was planned to have 12 missions rather than the final 9, and we have some information on the 3 that didn't make it in. First up, intended to be the 6th mission, was the
Central Transit Hub in Area 9.
This was an example of Decay's desire to revisit random places mentioned in passing in the original game. We actually know a lot about how these levels would have progressed and what the players would do in them due to leftover dialogue in the files.
Anyone read me? I say again, this is Lambda Labs. Can anyone read me? Ah, Doctor, it's good to hear your voice. We have been trying to contact the Central Security Station for quite some time. We are trying to stop the alien influx, but something is preventing us from doing so. Some sort of energy directed from the other side seems to be holding the dimensional breach open by force. Our sensors are too close to the anomaly to give us clean readings on the rift. We must use the Omega satellite. We tried to launch the delivery rocket, but those soldiers seem to have shut down the launch sequence.
Here, Gina and Colette would have to get to a file room through the transit hub to force the Black Mesa air traffic systems to allow launches to take place. Riveting stuff. The mission would have ended with a Gargantua getting crushed by a bridge mechanism, as indicated by this leftover animation. Also, this pizza.
If you're hungry, help yourself to some pizza over there.
Next up, the original Mission 8 was the hangar. Pretty much all we know is that there would have been a hangar, an osprey for players to destroy, and a scientist being interrogated about who's wearing these other 2 HEV suits the military are tracking. It's another glossed over tidbit from Half-Life 1 expanded on, which is cool in an unnecessary sort of way. And finally, the ever so interesting Cut Mission 9. While the overall plot and what was meant to happen isn't known, we have one scene described. Gina and Colette saving Gordon from his death at the hands of those 2 soldiers from the End of Apprehension. See, one of Half-Life Cinema sins was having Gordon wake up mostly unharmed in the trash compactor. Why not shoot him and then crush the body? Well, this mission showed that they tried, and if you fucked up, they did. The footage I'm showing here comes from Marfy Black's excellent recreation of the scene. I'll put a link for that down below as well. I'm guessing that players would progress by driving off or killing these soldiers, and Gordon would just flop into the compactor where he wakes up in Half-Life 1. Time constraints forced Gearbox to cut all 3 of these levels, and instead we're left with an expansion where every mission is to turn on a thing so something cool can happen in the other games. And the easiest way to play it today is this fan port, which is very good and I'm sure functioned perfectly back in 2008, but there just hasn't been any support for it in so long. I'll leave a link to a ModDB download in the description though, as well as a link to a pretty promising mod in development, somewhere between a port and rework of Decay that'll turn it into a single-player adventure starring Gina. Oh wait, yeah, this is about Gina, right? Come on, need an outro. Got it. Gina Cross may have perished off-screen in an alien sewer, but she'll always have a special place in my heart as the hologram in the training mode. And thank you very much for watching.
I will see you up ahead.